what we noticed every day, the further we walked up, if you walk back on your tracks a few hours later, there's always jaguar tracks, sort of almost like they're following you. And then they've also got other species. Like I love the Dorado, but I'll venture as far to say that I like the Pacu the most. It's like what they call a freshwater permit, where they look kind of like a piranha. They're just massive and black, and they eat these fruit flies, or you can catch them on like hopper patterns on the surface. And yeah, very, very cool fish, and strong. One of the strongest freshwater fish that I know.
That was Jako Lucas taking us to one of the many crazy destinations he's fished around the planet. We are getting Yaku's top doable extreme trips list today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how's it going today? Check out our Ask a Pro segment, where you can ask a question and get highlighted on an upcoming short snippet podcast. You can just head over to wetflyswing.com/askapro and just submit your question. There's a little basically I think it's a 2 or 3 question little survey. So that's the easy way to submit that. And I'll get that question on the air and get you an answer in an upcoming segment. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Trxstle designs, engineers, and manufactures industry-leading outdoor products and premium apparel. From their patented, game-changing telescopic fly rod carrier and their specialized waterproof cases and fly boxes, to their magnetic nipper system that are revolutionizing how people snip their line. Please head over to wetflyswing.com/Trxstle to get started today. That's wetflyswing.com/Trxstle. TRXSTLE to support this podcast and an amazing product and brand today. The Fly Fishing Film Tour is back. Don't miss this year's 2022 F3T as it returns to theaters near you for another season on the water. Full of rod-bending action, unforgettable storytelling from coast to coast, swag, and more from local conservation partners. Please head over to wetflyswing.com/F3T to find a show near you. That's wetflyswing.com/F3T or flyfilmtour.com. Check it out right now. Jako Lucas is back this time to take us around the world to hear some of the most prized locations that he's fished and some of the places that he thinks are definitely doable for all of us today. Jako has been to many of the exotic destinations and shares a few of these stories today. This one is another one that's too good to slow up. So without further ado, here is Jako Lucas from Capt Jack Productions. How's it going, Jako?
Hi there, Dave. All good. Just got back from a fantastic trip and getting to do some real life work. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for making the time again to come on. We had you on the show way back in episode 68, which was almost 3 years ago. So it's amazing to think it's been 3 years, but it has. And we're going to dig into, we're going to touch on a few things. I think that the striped marlin trip sounds interesting. And I'm just really curious, in the last 2.5, 3 years, where you've been, because you're kind of out there everywhere. And so I got a few questions for you. Take us back first now, between 2019, March of 2019, when we did that episode, and now, what have you been up to?
So, I've basically, obviously we've been through a pretty interesting time of our lives with the whole COVID thing, and it's probably a discussion that everybody talks about every single day of their lives. But I've still kind of been trying to slowly do as much as I can with regards to traveling and whatever restrictions may have come with it. Obviously, there's been a lot of trips that's kind of been held up and rolled over, and now we're slowly starting to pick up with that again. So still kind of working on that. And then I have been guiding a lot on my kind of, let's say, relatively new location that I've been sort of full-time guiding on the Texas coast. And then just kind of putting my head down and keeping working on different stuff, busy with a new movie on Jax that should be available next year. And busy building a place for my guests to stay in Port O'Connor, and busy with a clothing brand called Fly Religion. And so just keeping myself as busy as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you got all sorts of stuff going on. Where, you're kind of known as one of those people that are out there traveling since you've, you moved to Texas, right, a few years back. Are you still getting out? I mean, do you still travel just as much as you did, say, 5, 10 years ago? Is that still a big part of what you do?
Yeah, I think last year was the least amount of traveling that I've done in a while. I think last year we did the Yeti a trip to the Seychelles in January, and then COVID happened, and then I did one trip to Mexico and a few sort of odd trips. But this year it started to pick up like normal. I think I've done 3 or 4 hosted trips, one to the jungle in Brazil and in the Amazon, and one to Guanaja, and this one now to Mexico. I've actually done a couple to Mexico. So it's slowly starting to pick up again. And I think people are getting into that point where, like it feels like there's been a time of our life taken away with all the things that's happened. And what I just try and preach to everybody now is that just follow whatever regulations there are. Just kind of, if you need to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you, whatever you want to do, and just kind of get on with life. Because I mean, in the bigger picture, if you start looking at how the lifespan of a human, a year is a very long time to take out of your life. So you have to kind of make your decisions and get on with it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think everybody's feeling like it's just like, regardless of everything, just it's time. Everybody wants to move on. I mean, I've been the same way. We've been kind of locked down, and I've been wanting to do these trips up to Canada, and I think this year, I think we're gonna be breaking out of it as well. So this is really exciting. Well, out of all those trips, so when you think back, you've got this marlin trip, which we're going to touch on. Any other trips? We talked about GTs a few years ago. What other trip or species really sticks out to you? Anything, aside from the marlin, that is something, the last few years that you've done that's been pretty cool?
Well, so the very unique one I did before the marlin one, when we went to Brazil in the Amazon, was fishing for a species called the Payara, which is a vampire fish. Which is it's not unknown. It's a very kind of, I believe, like a well-known fish because of the big fangs, or AKA the vampire fish with these giant teeth. And some of my friends at Untamed Angling found this river called the Xingu in the Amazon, where you kind of stay next to this Kayapo village with the native people, and you fish for these vampire fish. And it's like one of those places, like, you go to, there's various places in the world that you can, or various places in South America that you can find these vampire fish, but it's one thing when you can find like a high density or volume of them to actually be able to go fish there or take clients there and catch a vampire fish, because they're really tricky to catch. But it was an absolute phenomenal trip. And we managed to all get a really good vampire fish. The one thing that I kind of missed out on, and I really wanted to do, is that if you catch a vampire fish of around 20 pounds or a real like trophy, then you can take one of the teeth out of the fish's mouth, one of the big fangs. It does no harm to the fish. They've got like teeth loaded up, ready to go. And then you go to the chief of the Kayapo. And then what he does is he does this every day. He kind of cuts you with those teeth so that you can become a warrior. And he cuts it wherever, like usually on your arms or forearms and stuff, which I wanted to do because it sounds super awesome. But unfortunately, my biggest one was 16.5 pounds. So we'll get there one day.
Oh, right. You didn't quite get there. Yeah. So that's cool. So on those vampire fish, let's go on that just for a second here. What is that? So just the fishing for them, is that something? It sounds like you're only getting a couple of shots maybe per day.
Well, on our trip, we had a unusually tougher week, I would say. Although, like I said, that's the uniqueness of this place, is that you can actually still manage to get one, even though you've got tougher fishing conditions. So we were mainly fishing like heavier lines with big streamer patterns. I feel like you can't cast a fly big enough for those things. They just seem to devour anything, whether it's the same size as them or maybe even bigger. They'll just try and go for it. So we were fishing sinking lines quite a lot, but the story happened so that the guys that went after us, the week after us, the water level started rising a little bit, and then the bait fish started moving up and through the river, and they seemed to just turn the vampire fish on. And they were, the week after us, they actually caught like 150 or more vampire fish, and a lot of them on popper. So on the surface, just smacking flies. They remind me a lot of tigerfish in Africa, just the way that they eat and the way that you hunt for them. And I mean, setting the hook on one of those is actually, I mean, it's such a quick, just, I don't know the speed that they hit the fly at, but it's incredible. And then once you get your hook set, because it feels like there's nowhere that you can really get the hook set in that bony mouth, they start jumping and going crazy. It's not the longest fight because I think they use so much energy jumping. But I mean, that however long that is, it's a big adrenaline rush for sure. And then, I mean, those are the target species, the main target species. But when you fish the Amazon, there's a bunch of other stuff. Wolffish, which I also wanted to catch, which we got. Matrinchas, Pacu, all sorts of strange things, which is also something I love to do, just getting all the variety.
Yeah, the variety. And I was just thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about, some of the trips you've done. I mean, and I always, Jeff Currier, I'm sure he's always comes to mind when you think about these trips because he's got this goal of hitting all these different species. When you look back at what you've done and you've been all over the world, are there a few, maybe, 5, 10, 15 fish or destinations? And I know I'm just thinking now you did something with, who was it? You did a destination podcast, right? A while back. Who was that with?
Yeah. I did one with Jim at Yellow Dog on the Waypoints podcast. And it's funny when he asked me before we did the podcast, can you round up 10 of your favorite locations in the world?
There you go.
And I thought, this would be easy. That's going to be, and then I sent him an email and it had 30 locations on. I was like, Jim, I'm sorry. I don't know. They're all special. There's obviously some that I'd love to visit frequently because they're just so awesome. But man, I really take every fishery into perspective on what it is, whether or not the fishing's tough or the species target. For some reason, and I know this is probably exactly the same for Jeff, especially when you haven't caught a specific species of fish, there's just that extra challenge and adrenaline. I definitely, also with this Payara trip we did, once I got the Payara sort of done, it was amazing to still fish for them. But my next challenge was to try and get a wolffish, which is this prehistoric looking fish that looks like a coelacanth. And they're in these very unique ponds and stuff. And at one stage, we were actually swimming across this little, which we shouldn't have done because long story short, we were looking at this rock. We were casting at the rock. We thought there would be a wolffish, nothing there. And myself and Lucas, the guide, we asked the native guy, could we swim across and fish for that rock to the next rock? And he's like, I'm not going with you guys. There's no way. So we were like, oh, well, anyway, like we do, we just went and swam across. And as soon as we got to the other rock, there actually 2 electric eels came up. And those things will jolt you with 600 volts and you're going to get knocked out. So, but that's kind of the stupidity on sort of the drive to try and get that next species. And it just happens with and it doesn't necessarily need to be the biggest species of fish for me. If whatever it is, I'll fish for it. So that's kind of the thing that drives me all the way. And actually in Mexico last year, when I was lucky enough to be invited by a client, I'd never caught an Atlantic permit before. And as you may know, permit are terrible things. And I've managed to get some of the other species around the world. And luckily last year in Mexico, we went there. We probably hit the best fishing that you could ever have. It's that trip that you wanted to be on, like that one that you should have been on last week. We ended up landing 52 permit between 4 anglers in a week's time. So yeah, that's a very special standout trip. And the best fish out of that whole trip that I actually remember the most was it wasn't the biggest one of the trip, but it was one that really challenged me, and I had to cast a bunch of times at it. I had to change the fly a lot. He actually gave me a few chances at changing flies. So yeah, it's always just keeping that challenge going. And now the next challenge is to try and get the 4th species of permit, which we are going to try and do end of February next year.
There you go. Yeah. That's really cool. And when you do these trips, are these kind of, you mentioned Yeti, and it's part of your thing, right? You're, I don't know if you're sponsored, but you have these companies that are helping to get you over there. How do you do it? Are you kind of working with Yellow Dog? I'm not curious. I'm curious how that all works. Because obviously traveling around the world is not cheap, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in all honesty, I would never have the finances to be able to do what I do unless. So basically how it all started off is just through meeting people working at a fly shop, then guiding a bunch of people and building up the client base. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Jim a long time ago. And I kept working as hard as possible, and then was lucky enough to be invited by Jim to become an ambassador for Yellow Dog Flyfishing. And it was a no-brainer because like now I can host trips. I've got the support of Yellow Dog, which is, I mean, I don't want it to sound like an advert, but if you go on a trip and you do it with a company like Yellow Dog, then like you're going to be prepared for it. Because when I do a hosted trip, it's like communication with the clients all the way. Most of the locations that I'm hosting is a trip that I've done before. So you know the travel, which is the most daunting part for everybody, what tackle to take with and how to travel there. So that's usually the questions. And if you do it with people like that, then the hosted trips are awesome to spend time with great clients. And it's sometimes almost like guiding where you share those magic moments with clients getting into their dream fish. So it's really good. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, well, and I'm thinking, let's just stay on that Yellow Dog track for a little bit. So you mentioned, I don't have the episode in front of me, but do you remember which 10 species you talked about?
So it wasn't species specific. It was location and.
Oh, it was location.
Yeah. So, I really tried to do it in no particular order, but I would usually, if anybody asked me top 5, I'd usually start off with Seychelles. It's hard to beat that place. It's a place that'll spoil you very easily. And then we went on to Tanzania, for Tigerfish and Bolivia for the Dorado. And I think I had Australia. There was Kamchatka, Mongolia, Gabon in Africa. Again, there's a lot of Africa stuff. I'm a little bit, because I'm from South Africa, there's a lot of.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And sheesh, I mean, the list goes on. Yeah.
We could put a link out. I'm just curious because, we've got that, and I'll put a link out to that episode so people can take a look. And I'm just curious to be building. You mentioned 30, or do you want to keep adding a few maybe that you that are maybe? Well, you got some stuff on your bucket list too, right? Do you have that list and like you've already got like, okay, these are the next 20 trips I want to do in the next few years?
Yeah, I have that bucket list. That I'll actually find it quickly on my computer because I've got it pretty close to me. And the thing is, it always grows. Like it just never stops.
Yeah, you're never going to complete it, right? You're never going to complete it.
Yeah, it's something, but that's the other thing is it's always good to keep that dream alive and keep with that next and just keep sort of at it to just make sure that you can and that's what, like again, that keeps the blood pumping and wanting to see something new. That's kind of where we're at its best. So for my top 10 locations, what I had was Seychelles, obviously for all various different reasons, the different species and GTs. In Tanzania for the tigerfish, Bolivia for Dorado, Kamchatka, that insane trout fishery, Mongolia for taimen, Australia for everything, permit, blue bastards. I like Mexico too a lot because there's also actually, like I said, with this thing we did with the marlin, and then you also got the permit and tarpon, and there's a lot of cool places that you can visit there, and it's so close, especially from a US perspective, to travel there. I had Texas on my list because now it's kind of my home waters, so I really have become very passionate about the fishery, and there's very cool stuff, more than what people know. And then I had Costa Rica there because I've done quite a few trips to Costa Rica. There's specific places where it's I wouldn't say impossible to find a higher density of tarpon, but they've got some really special tarpon fisheries in Costa Rica. And then at number 10, I had Brazil. Again, no specific order, just because it's the Amazon and there's all the different species and all the stuff. So it's the Amazon. I mean, as everybody grows up, the Amazon, when you see something on the TV, I'm sure everybody that loves fishing, the first thought is, how can I go fish a cool place like that in the jungle and everything? The other places that I kind of had on that wasn't on the top 10 list, but I still love them, was Cuba, Norway, the Bahamas, Louisiana, Gabon, Belize. Lesotho is this cool little place that's a little country in South Africa. And then Florida will still be great, particularly because of the way that you also fish for tarpon. We have that where you can actually sight fish them in shallower water. Montana, I still think is great from a beauty perspective, from how beautiful it is. And also, I mean, it's still at the end of the day, incredible trout fishing. And then I've got Sudan, which is something I did quite a while back with my friend Oliver White and the guys from African Waters. And it is it is really cool. It's like you're fishing next to a desert, and then you fish this beautiful tropic ocean. And I don't think there's a better place in the world to catch triggerfish. It's going to be hard to beat that place. It's insane trigger fishing. The other places that I've got on my bucket list that I really want to get to, and some of them actually might be strange to some people because it's so close to, is Alaska. I've never fished Alaska. I've never fished Canada. And then there's another place in the jungle called Kenjam that's pretty close to Xingu, but you're just fishing a little bit of a different watershed. And it's very cool because it's a smaller little river, more sight fishing. You've got all the different species too. And you're fishing with smaller rods, actually. You're fishing like 6-7 weight rods. It's like check nymphing for little pacu and all the different species. I think actually Jeff's been there, and I'm sure that he had an absolute ball at that place.
Right.
And then New Zealand is also very high up there. And it's strange because, so for me, I am not particularly like directly going to New Zealand for the trout. Like I think my first perspective or the direction that I want to go when I go to New Zealand would be going to the flats where the guys are catching those big yellowtail on the flats. I'm not sure what they're called they're species of the amberjack. So we call them yellowtail in South Africa too. I think they call them kingfish in New Zealand. So the next one is also Patagonia and Chile. Would love to go and do some trout fishing there. There's a place called Xingu in the Central African Republic where some of my friends have discovered this amazing fishery or river where you can actively target Goliath tigerfish on fly, which a few years back seemed impossible. Like the type of water that they lived in didn't seem possible on a fly, but these guys from Goliath expeditions have actually found this place. So hopefully we can get there one day. And then Papua New Guinea, Nicaragua, Iceland, Greenland. I mean, I can keep going on, but yeah, that's kind of the ones that's off the top of my head. Yeah.
And now let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. With more than 40 years of experience in coffee, the Anglers Coffee Team roasts a full range of coffees with one goal in mind, delivering excellent coffee to every single angler. Responsibly sourced from farms using sustainable growing practices, you can rest easy knowing you are doing your part. Roasted and shipped within 48 hours to assure freshness. For me, it's all about that freshness and taste. When I crack open a bag of Anglers in the morning, I feel good because I know it not only tastes amazing, but I'm supporting great movements along the way. With a coffee blend for every taste, a dry dropper on-the-go tea bag option, and a roast sampler, you know Joe at Anglers is serving your needs. It's time to step up to better coffee and more impact for the fish species and causes that we love. Just visit wetflyswing.com/anglers to grab your bag of greatness today. That's wetflyswing.com/anglers, ANGLERS, to make a change and get a sweet taste today. Okay, now back to the show.
This is good. This gives us the list, so we got a bunch on there. And out of all those, I mean, from the U.S. based, I mean, there's a few in the U.S. and Mexico kind of pops out to me because, it seems like it's, it is. It's one of those places that's a little easier to get. What would be, if you're thinking Mexico, would be the top species that you'd be thinking about?
Yeah, I think the top one that always pops up is permit fishing, just because they got such an incredible permit fishery in that Ascension Bay area. I'm also actually doing a trip in April next year to a place called Xcalak, X-Flats, which is a little bit closer to Belize, I believe. And usually it's weird I love fishing all these different locations, but from a geographical point, when I start having to figure out if it's north or south or this, well, I'm terrible at it. But this is going to be a super cool trip. It's a very young guy, Jess, that's built up a little operation there, and he's been doing phenomenal and really good permit fishing. I think they do get some baby tarpon and some bonefish and all the other species, but definitely a phenomenal permit fishery. So definitely, and having traveled now a couple times to Mexico, it's also just, from the US, it's just such a quick trip. So easy.
Yeah, so easy and not quite as much money as far as airfare. And that's always one of the worries. You think about the Mexico and issues with safety, but that's just making sure you got things lined out and you're not going to a crazy place. That's not really an issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I now traveling to Mexico, I think they're trying to make it easier for people to travel there because firstly, you do not need a COVID test before the
Oh,
trip.
wow.
With most places, you need a negative test. So they get you in there. You do a rapid test leaving there, but they've made it super easy at the airports. You go for a test, 45 minutes, and you get the results. We actually got a little bit quicker than what they said, but yeah, and the people, you can see the people are happy to see just people traveling there, and it's definitely getting very busy. And like you said, I think the one thing that's very attractive about it is just how affordable it is when you kind of compare it to all these like very exotic, luxurious locations.
Yeah, that's right. And how do you, I'm just curious, out of all these, 20 or 30 places that are coming up, in a perfect world, you could hit all of them. I don't know how many you would hit a year, but how do you choose which ones, the next few on the list? Like this next year, is that just kind of however it comes together? Or are you really planning this? Like these are the 5 I want to hit. I know Currier's kind of like that, right? He's got this list and he's kind of checking it off.
Yeah, so what I will do sometimes is if it's definitely a location that I want to go and visit, I'll try and I'll have a chat with Jim and then start putting a hosted trip together for those locations, which helps me get there and I can take some clients with me. Or sometimes what I do is a lot of times if I've done a location like Bolivia or the Seychelles, it's kind of almost become like an annual trip because there's so many people that want to go see it. So those are always kind of maybe every year. So the Seychelles, I'm almost doing a hosted trip there every year.
Oh,
and
wow.
Bolivia, I would say almost like by every second year, I would do a trip there. But yeah, I usually try and do something new every year. And next year I've got a couple new ones, but mostly I would say the majority of them is stuff that I've done before. And now I still try and travel as much as possible. But the one thing that I almost don't want to say like I've been fortunate with it, but with the guiding that I've got on the coast is it's picked up a lot. I think people have realized that they've got something closer to them that they can also access. And people want to get out there, and it's just been hard for them to travel. So my guiding stuff has been phenomenal there. Been very busy and been lucky with the fishing has been fantastic. So yeah, it's been good.
Wow. So this is the, are you talking kind of redfish and all that stuff?
Yeah, I would say our bread and butter is the classic Texas red fishing, where you're fishing shallow water for the tailing redfish, and that's kind of our main target. But then there's some special things too. I spend a lot of time chasing jacks. That reminds me a lot of GTs in the Seychelles, and I'm sure a lot of people will get pretty excited when they see the movie that we're busy with. We've got some pretty incredible jack footage, and then we're going to kind of in the movie compare the two fish, not like showcase the GTs and the reason why everybody gets excited about it, but now they've got this fish on their doorstep that's the same attitude, same eat, same everything. They might not get over 100 pounds, but they still pull as hard as any GT in the world. So that's something I target a lot, and I always call them my day savers, because if I can get my client into a jack in the morning, I know he's pretty tired, so we can just move on and have a good day. And then there's other species. There's the big black drum. We do also get big bull reds and tarpon. So it's there. I wouldn't say like all the other stuff is as consistent as the classic Texas red fishing, but there's some good stuff.
There you go. So you got a bunch down there. And yeah, I was just kind of thinking back to, I think it was episode 204. We had Jake Jordan on, talked about some of the billfish stuff he does. And
he's
one of the guys, right?
He's the man for sure. I feel like Jake is like one of the, I mean, I'll see him as a pioneer of bill fishing on a fly rod. I mean, or to me, he is definitely just with how technically, like how he's approached the whole thing. It's incredible I've spoken to him a couple of times before, and the wealth of knowledge and how he targets billfish there's a lot to learn from him for sure.
And I love that we're all over the place on this one, because this is, I think we're covered everything. So on the, Jako, on the next one, if we get you on, we'll drop back down more specifically, but we're kind of covered everything. This is cool. So let's dig into that just for a second on the striped marlin, because Jake talked about, kind of chumming up the fish and then casting to them when they come in. But you had an experience on a recent trip where you actually weren't chumming them, right? You were just casting directly to these fish. Can you speak to that a little bit, what that was all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely mind blowing, and like I said before, like I needed to remind myself every day what we're actually doing, which seemed so unbelievable. I mean, the previous experience I also had with billfish, and the majority of the way that you target a billfish on a fly rod is where you have teasers out. You kind of get him out on the tees, and then you've maybe got a bait and switch where you've got like a cut bait that you've got on a line, which you just kind of sort of casting and really firing the billfish up. But in this case, we were basically running around, you finding, and the best of it, all of it was one of my favorite birds. If we could find a frigate bird, there's a very, very likely chance of finding these billfish feeding on bait balls. And what we would do is we just like look in the distance and just sort of see what we can see with regards to frigate birds, and sometimes even seals, or how they just corral the bait fish together. And then we just run over there and basically run over, stop the boat, and cast over these bait balls. And it is absolutely phenomenal, because you would maybe see like 4 or 5 striped marlin come up, but if you look down in the water, there's maybe another 100 of them down there, just kind of just corralling these bait fish together. And it's almost like they've got this whole system where 2 would come up, slash, eat, go down, and just keep doing it like that. And the way they were chasing the flies was, I mean, it's like any GT fishing or anywhere, they just speed up and smack the fly, and then it's all chaos. So you can imagine hooking up to a marlin on a fly, trying to set the hook. This thing takes off. I've just put up 1 or 2 little videos that we took where we absolutely get manhandled by marlin. We just fly lines broken and leaders popped.
Right.
And yeah, it's absolute chaos. But we managed to land over 30 striped marlin on fly in 4 days between a few anglers. So I mean, that itself just is, and I've never been.
And how big are these fish?
I would say you actually get very excited when you hook one under 100 pounds, because then you know you're not going to kill yourself. So I would say, I mean, we saw maybe a couple that was like even in the 40-pound range, but the majority of the ones that we landed was sort of in the 80 to 200-pound range. If you can, if the marlin stays up, it's kind of a blessing, because then they jump a lot and you keep them on the surface and land them. But we definitely had a couple of occasions where we caught what I always call them devilfish. They like, same like a milkfish. When they start sounding, there's almost no way to move them up. So the captain of the boat and the guide sort of comes big into play there. We start circling around with the boat and trying to like force them to come up. So it's a very cool, and the guys that have been doing that show there, or the guys that set up that operation there, the guys from Los Locos, and I've got other friends that fished there before, but they've really set up a beautiful, like a great operation. And you kind of go and do like this crazy bull fishing, and you get back to this little town, and you go and eat like the best Mexican food and have a good time.
Nice.
So it's an epic trip, and again, super easy to get there and very affordable for bull fishing. Usually bull fishing, I'd have to be completely transparent. Bullfishing in general, if you want to catch one on a fly, is going to be it's a big, very expensive program with the big boats you have to take out and the big crew and stuff. But this was very, very affordable and great people and epic time.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool to hear. And the video, so you have a channel, right? So this is still like Capt Jack Productions on YouTube?
I actually just put them up on Instagram. I'll probably load some of them up on YouTube and Vimeo, the channels that I have, but I just kind of put it out on Instagram, because, you know, like social media, always we just show everybody the glory shots of the successful trip, but you don't see the whipping that happens 70% of the time. It's a failure. So it was actually great to see the interaction of people just seeing those videos and going, okay, well, this happens to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. No, and this is like, are you doing like on Reels, doing some longer videos, putting stuff up there?
Yeah. I usually put the Reels. For some reason, it reaches a few more people than with just a normal one. So it just seemed to have reached a few more people. And it's also funny, like to see people commenting on just some ideas of what we could have maybe done better. And it's always, that's the beautiful thing about fly fishing, that learn a few things. And like I said, there was a few people that commented that we needed to use a stripping basket and all this advice. And I said to them, guys, this is great advice, but we tried a lot of things. And the fact, like this last video that I posted, was basically the guy that was with me, John Snipes, is probably one of the best fly fishermen I've ever been with on a boat. And he had already at that stage landed 9 marlin on that specific fly line. And what happened is he got to eat first cast of the morning, set the hook beautifully, and then this thing ran off and he felt it bunch up in his hand and he just pinched it and snapped it. And a lot of people are commenting about how we should have kept the hands wider and everything, but the line is basically just worn out. I mean, it's just been, well, I could see that line was just, like I said, I sometimes call fly line nuclear spaghetti of just how it just pops around when you hook up to a big fish. And that's basically what happened. It just did its own thing and broke it, and just you have to tie back up and get ready.
That's nuts. On your videos, I'm curious, do you have anything out there that maybe has gone kind of viral or something that comes to mind that really, went a lot bigger than other stuff you've done?
No, the original Gangsters of the Flatbed one was probably one of the craziest ones that we just went viral. And it was, like I said, with my very unprofessional editing skills and videoing skills, people seem to enjoy the rawness of it. That's why, like, I've kind of gone into that same direction with a lot of stuff. One project that I was really happy with that we did a couple, I wouldn't say recently, but a couple years back was the one in Australia called the Glorious Bastards, where we did this amazing trip to the Vessel Islands with a good friend of mine, Josh, and it was just a great experience. And we just caught all these different new species. That we caught 2 different kinds of permit, a blocky and an annock permit. And then we fished for this very iconic Australian fish called the blue bastard, which is an amazing fish to fish for. I really enjoyed that project, and it came out a little bit. Usually I never really had a good storyboard, and this one molded a little bit better into like some sort of storyline with a lot of fish porn to go with it. And this Jack movie that we're busy with now is definitely also going to have a little bit more of a storyline, just to kind of tell people the story about Jackson and all that stuff. But there'll still be enough to get everybody excited about going fishing for Jack. So we've got some incredible eats and all that stuff. But honestly, like the last couple of videos that I've put on, again, like I said, the funny thing is it's been about the fishing fails where, like we're casting a tailing redfish and the angler does everything right and he hooks up and it comes off, and for some reason one redfish video I did went completely viral because I think people associated with it so much better than the actual success story.
Exactly. Instead of seeing the fish, the whatever we call that shot, holding the fish up, you're showing the cool stuff where it didn't go quite right, and it's kind of you're connecting people to it, right?
Yeah, and it's I think it's probably important for us to definitely make sure, especially new people coming into the game, just to because I think if they get bombarded with success stories all the time, which I mean, I'm definitely guilty of it. I'm not going to proclaim that I'm not, but the grip and grin shot's beautiful, but a lot of people need to know that there's a lot of failure involved with that. And even with a lot of the exploratory trips we did, like the one we did in Siberia a few years back that we were lucky enough to go to, we went to rivers there that, I mean, I can't even imagine that anybody's ever fished it and found no fish. And then we would go to this one place and suddenly we found a whole heap of fish. But there was a lot of trial and error on that particular trip, which you can almost not imagine fishing a place like that and not finding fish, but it's just part of it.
Yeah, no, and are you? I'm curious. With we mentioned Jeff Currier, and I'll put a link out to that episode. Do you have, a list? Are you trying to, I know Jeff's got this thing going where he's trying to, I'm not sure how many species he's at, but are you doing the same thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to check off 300 species before I head out of here?
Jeff's very good with keeping up to date with his list. I don't. I've got a specific species in mind, and I try and tick it off, and I kind of just put it in, it's in the memory bank, and I'm I feel very privileged and happy that I've managed to accomplish the goal. I actually, looking back, I wish I kind of started keeping a little bit more of a diary and moving forward. I would honestly love for Jeff to write a book one day, just because of he's somebody for a lot of people to look up to, and I'm definitely look up to him as a mentor, just with all the stuff that he's accomplished. And sometimes I think to myself, man, I'm lucky I've caught this fish, and maybe Jeff hasn't caught it yet. And then you look at what he's accomplished, you're like, oh yeah, he's definitely got it. He got it about 10 years ago. So it's And the thing with Jeff that's also fantastic, and a lot of people that I look up to is most of those guys did that stuff pre-social media, and they never really had any bragging about anything. They just did the thing and got on with it, and just through hard work and just kept on going with it, they just accomplished all those goals, and it's great. Like I'd be honored to be like any of those people.
Yeah, totally. What is the we're still jumping around here, and this is totally cool. I'm the Costa Rica. What was the last Costa Rica trip you did? What were you? What was that? What were you chasing there?
So the original one that we went for, the main goal that of all the trips I've done to Costa Rica has been fishing for big tarpon, and it actually started off the first time I went there. A friend of mine, Grant Wiswell, was working on a movie called Atlanticus, which is this basically what we were doing is we were chasing tarpon all over the world at the different locations you can find them. We went to Gabon in Africa. We managed to accomplish, that trip we struggled for the majority of the time. It was only the last day that we managed to find a couple of tarpon to get on camera, because sometimes that adds a little bit of extra pressure when you've got the goal of trying to film something too. But we managed to get that done. And then the first place I fished there was, it's on a river called the Seychelles. It's on the border of Panama and Costa Rica, where the place is called Tarponville. So it's definitely a place where you find big tarpon, and it's a unique. I wouldn't say that it's when you fish a place like Florida, it's very intense when you see like a string of fish or like a daisy chain fish in front of you, where you cast towards them and kind of feed them that way. You've got rolling tarpon moving everywhere, and you're fishing intermediate or sinking lines, and you're just slowly kind of moving the fly through the water column, and then you get to eat. But it's for me, I love it. It's the unique sense of you sometimes it just feels like it ticks the line, and suddenly this 100+ pound tarpon jumps out of the water. And like I said, I fished there, and then I fished a place called the Rio Colorado, and another place called the Jungle Tarpon Reserve, and all like their own unique elements. Just like the Jungle Tarpon Reserve is a place where you're fishing for tarpon almost 120 miles from the ocean. They're way upriver, and you fish for this in almost like these little trout pockets where there'll be an 80 or 100 pound tarpon sitting just like sipping. It's crazy when you hook up. Just
sipping bugs and stuff like that?
The smaller ones would, but there's these bait fish that also get trapped up into these eddies. But tarpon sometimes just seem so calculated when they feed. They just basically swim up and just scoop up the bait fish like it's the easiest thing in the world. So it kind of catches a lot of people off guard the first time they fish there, because they see a tarpon roll, but they can't really judge the size of it until they set the hook on it and it starts jumping around. Then it goes wild. But that friend of mine, Grant, with that Atlanticus movie, if anybody has a chance to watch that, that's pretty incredible, just with the journey of tarpon and the different places that you can target them. But again, Costa Rica is just a quick hop over. I think it's like usually about 2 flights. I fly from Austin to Atlanta to San Jose, I think is the main town you fly into, and then you're pretty much almost there. So super easy travel, pretty inexpensive, great trip to do.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Togens Fly Shop, providing superior quality products at an affordable price, an amazing resource for fly tying materials, tools, and fly fishing accessories. Togens has you covered when looking for unique in-house products, but also supports and supplies materials and tools from other leading fly brands you know and trust. Togens is now offering their mystery fly tying box, where they simplify the process for you in choosing materials. You're only one click away from these hand-picked subscription tying boxes that are packed with value at almost half the cost. And I recently made an order through Togens, and the experience was perfect. After a recent trip nymphing for trout, I had to replace my tungsten beads and some jig hooks and a few other items. The products arrived in a couple of days from Togens with a nice little card, a bonus value, and a welcome note from the Togens family. Since 2005, Togens has been over-delivering on price and customer service, so it's time to discover for yourself what the buzz is all about. Head over to wetflyswing.com/Togens and take a look at their diverse selection of products today. That's wetflyswing.com/TOGENS. Togens. Togens. Okay, now back to the show.
Yeah, no, and Tarpon is definitely, and obviously that's trying to think of the last Tarpon episode we did. I think Bruce Chard was on, and he talked about those giant tarpon or whatever. But what about, I'm curious, on Bolivia. You mentioned Bolivia. Was that Dorado, golden Dorado?
That's fishing for the golden Dorado. Super mean fish. Again, I usually try, a lot of people would sort of almost measure them up to tigerfish. There's just this thing where, like the one guy say, yeah, the Dorado is much better and the tigerfish much better. I love both of them. The cool thing in Bolivia is you can actually like sight fish for these fish in very small little pieces of river. And they like almost you're fishing like a little spring creek for potentially a 15 or 20 pound Dorado, which is something that you can't really do with tigerfish. So, and then you've got the jungle backdrop. And I remember the first time we went there, we camped quite far upriver. And what we noticed every day, the further we walked up, if you walk back on your tracks a few hours later, there's always jaguar tracks, sort of almost like they're following you. But so that, I mean, it's just amazing. And you hear all the parrots and the monkeys and the wildlife. And then they've also got other species. Like, I love the Dorado, but I'll venture as far to say that I like the Pacu the most. It's like what they call a freshwater permit, where they look kind of like a piranha. They're just massive and black, and they eat these fruit flies, or you can catch them on like hopper patterns on the surface. And yeah, very, very cool fish, and strong. One of the strongest freshwater fish that I know.
Right on. And I'm still just kind of going down through this list. A lot of these things, with some of these we've had episodes on, we've, Australia, we've kind of tried to cover a lot of the, some of these areas. One of them, Cuba, we haven't really done. How's that? Is Cuba getting to a point now where that's more realistic? I think is Jim is Yellow Dog one of the places that actually does trips there?
Yeah, Yellow Dog is definitely the only company that I know that legitimately gets people into Cuba, and I'm happy to be corrected on it. But they definitely have done their hard yards with regards to getting people from America in there, and the fishing. I mean, it's definitely, I feel like what a lot of my clients have mentioned that's fished in the US a lot in Florida is like taking a step back, just purely because, or like going a few years back, because of just how few people fish there, how little pressure it gets. The fish are happy. They feed pretty hard. The tarpon there, when you cast a fly at it, they're pretty aggressive and they eat it as hard as you can imagine. And then you've got an incredible permit fishery. Lots of bonefish, snook, the whole lot. But definitely the places that I've gone to, the tarpon fishing has been really incredible. Permit is still kind of permit, but I feel like they eat a little bit more regularly there. And you can, at some of the places in Cuba, you can also find them riding on stingrays. Like, I don't think they do it in a lot of places. I know they do it in the Bahamas and stuff, but they definitely eat a little bit more aggressively when they're sitting on a stingray. And just I don't think you can go into Havana yet. I think they had Havana a little bit closed down during this COVID time, but that also adds a great part of the trip. And the Cuban people are just awesome and friendly and festive, and you can go to the little different places in Havana and Hemingway's bar, and it's a very cool place. I've lost a few clients there, which I've managed to get back, but it's a good place.
There you go. And this is pretty good. I'm curious, because it's you got the fish species and all that stuff, and then you got the travel in the area. What for you is it? Is it kind of an equal part what you love most about all this stuff when you go to a new place? Is it kind of just everything, or do you really love one part of it more?
I think it's definitely become more of a whole trip for me. I would say a few years back it was like fishing and nothing else. But now I've kind of started to appreciate the whole element of it, especially having fished more and know that the fishing is something that you can't control. So if it's tough, you need to start enjoying everything about the trip, or else it's going to be a horrible time. So and like this last trip we did to the Amazon and Xingu, and it was just nice to spend a little bit of time with like the native people, where you just kind of like look at our lives the way we run it now. Like the way we live our life seems so complicated. We start buying more stuff, we start doing more stuff, and we just keep complicating our lives. And those people have nothing, and they're just happy, and they I mean, just seeing the little kids. I mean, there was kids, I don't know how old they were, but they seemed like, I mean, geez, they seemed really young, and they were swimming in the river, like great at swimming, great at just like, surviving in the world, where I think if you put a lot of people in a situation like that, like that's as comfortable as we are, they would find it hard to live in that kind of environment.
I did an episode with a good friend of mine, Greg, and we talked about Ecuador, and he's been living in Ecuador for 10 years now. He just moved down there, and he just loves it, right? And it's totally, he's living in a village, and, again, we don't realize it because we're in our own little bubble, but yeah, you don't have to have all this stuff, right? You could just go down and be happy living in a jungle somewhere. And you see it. When you see these local people, you see a lot of happy people down around the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, like, I've, again, a little bit with the social media stuff, you see all these things, and I don't do any kind of hunting, but I know a lot of friends that do, and, like, you try and see these people that think they're really badass, and then the village at the Kayapo, the chief of the village, the one evening came and sat with us, and he explained to us, like, how he would approach hunting a jaguar with a bow and arrow, or like monkeys or all that kind of stuff, and wow. That if that guy, I mean, it's incredible, like how much they know and in tune with nature. I think if you could say to anybody now, here's a bow and arrow, go and hunt a jaguar, I think you'll find zero people doing that.
No, yeah, nobody's gonna do it. I wouldn't even do it. I wouldn't even do it with a gun. I mean, it's like, damn, you don't want to miss that.
Yeah, I know. With my level of bow hunting, I'm sure I'll shoot myself in the foot before I shoot any kind of animal, and then I'll just injure myself for the animal to come and hunt me.
Right? Do you do some hunting?
Unfortunately, I've never really gotten into it. That the fishing and the guiding and everything has taken up so much time, and I've tried to stay focused on that. But I'm sure it seems great. Like I've got a lot of friends that do it, and I think it looks pretty awesome, but just never dedicated any time to it.
Yeah, no, totally. No, we have a pretty good feel for listeners in this show, and about half of the people that listen are hunters, in some form or fashion. So it's I always love digging into that a little bit.
This is just one subject. I mean, I'll quickly run over it, but it's an interesting discussion I had with somebody recently on social media, trying to kind of explain what we do, because I posted a video about one of the big arapaima I caught on a recent trip, and somebody just laid into me about how we were abusing the animals, and getting into it about like all the different things. And I try to explain to them, this is with hunting and fishing, that I'm looking at it from a fishing perspective. There's so many locations that we've started operating at where, firstly, if we weren't fishing there and looking after the fishery, it'll get commercially fished out. People go in there, rape the fishery, and just take everything they can and leave. And secondly, like a lot of places, we've set up a program where the local and native people can benefit from the clients coming in and fishing. So like in the Seychelles, the guys actually managed to set up where they can almost estimate the value of a GT being alive versus a GT being dead.
Oh, wow.
And a GT being alive is a lot more valuable than one just being killed and taken away. And the same goes for hunting. People don't understand, like, big game hunting. I'm not it's different strokes for different folks, but those people paying that money to do those hunts are actually saving that species from extinction. So it's, I mean, it's difficult to explain it to people, but it's the reality.
Yeah, no, it is. It's the people that love the sport the most, the people that protect it. Obviously, that's why you have Trout Unlimited and all these other groups, and most of the, fishermen are kind of leading the way with some of those places.
For sure.
That's a cool point. Let's take it out of here, Jako, with a couple. You mentioned, and I think Norway. So Norway's still on your bucket list, right? You haven't been there yet?
No, so actually, sorry, Norway was on my list of places I love. It just, I don't think it was, for some reason, it just got packed in so many. But Norway, I guided for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's just an absolute beautiful country. You're doing, again, something that I don't do very often, but which I did at one stage quite a bit of, is swinging flies for big Atlantic salmon. I would say it's a lot more of a gentleman's game compared to anything else that I do. You actually dress pretty nicely, and you kind of just quietly, slowly fishing for these big fish and just have beautiful scenery. But it's a very cool place. Beautiful. Norwegian people are great. So that's been always a very, I'd love to get back there. I always speak to my friends quite a bit when there, but it's no, I don't know if Norway in the last couple of years, since COVID, what their regulations were, but I know they were pretty stringent at one stage. So I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, gotcha. And then Kamchatka, were you up there? You're fishing for rainbows? Is that what you're going for there?
Yeah, and all sorts of other species, which was stuff that I actually wasn't imagined that I would catch there. And like there's a salmon called a cherry salmon, which is, I think it's like a combination of a pink and a chum salmon. I believe, I could be corrected, but the fact that you're fishing for rainbow trout legitimately with dry flies, where they're actively chasing mice and eating them. We had, on the trip that I did, we caught, I think it was a total of, in 2 weeks, we caught 3 trout, which was a little bit badly hooked. So we kept them. And in all of them, there were everything from 2 to 8 mice in their stomach. So
no way.
So it's unbelievable. And the funny thing is during the course of a day when you're fishing, you never really, I think in the 2 weeks, I only saw a mouse cross the river once. So you kind of like wonder, how does this all go down? Because they're obviously feeding on them a lot and quite aggressively. So but it's a cool wilderness trip. I actually had quite a few father and son sort of people groups with me, which was nice to see the father and son kind of share that wild environment. And we did one camping one, and then one we did in the cabin. So great, insane fishery.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge bucket list. And in fact, I was talking to some of our listeners. We did a little survey, and definitely that place, Kamchatka, it comes up all the time. It's not easy to get there, right? I think there it's almost, was that like a research thing where you had to, or does Yellow Dog actually do trips there?
So it is a combination. So I believe the fly shop is actually the guys that sort of run the operation. And then there's a few outfitters that book trips there, which Yellow Dog is one. But they've run a spectacular destination. The way that they've got that outfit going is great. And like I said, pretty well. Some of the travel you can actually, depending on what time of the season you go, I believe it's the majority of the season, you actually fly to Anchorage, and from Anchorage you fly to Petropavlovsk, or I always mispronounce that name, and then you've got one helicopter ride. So in the bigger scheme of things, it takes a little bit of time, but it's not terrible. But I know later season when they stop the Anchorage flight, you actually have to go through Moscow. Then it's a little bit of a longer trip. But I mean, you kind of, again, I've made peace with a 24 to 48 hour travel. Unfortunately, what it does though is it adds a lot of extra time for people to be away from the office when they have to work and stuff. So that's the only negative about it. But the fishing, when you travel that far to a place, for the most part, it's going to be the best of what you can ever fish for those specific target species. So it's definitely a very cool trip.
Do you, when you're out there, are you just set up, traveling wise? Can you just pretty much do your thing, whatever you have to do, computer stuff, like anywhere, or do you have a time where you go back to Texas and you do your work, or are you just kind of always kind of working as you go as you're traveling?
So I used to have my out of office on so that I don't like leave. I try and not leave people hanging. But usually with flights and in between traveling to those places is the time you can get the most work done, because there's nothing really else you can do instead of watching. You can also watch a movie and just kind of really shut down. But for the most of the time, I try and do as much work as I can before and after the trip, sort of get all that work done so that I can really be relaxed when I'm actually on the specific trip and just focus on the guests and the fishing and all that stuff.
That's right. Yeah, because you're setting up still, like you said, you're still guiding. I mean, what percentage of the time is that a good chunk of the time you're guiding in Texas and all that?
For the last sort of 2-3 years, it's taken up a big chunk, and I mean, I'm very happy with it. It's phenomenal. And what I always say to a lot of people is that I love everything I do, but I think out of everything that I do, I still like the guiding the most. Like, it's just really nice. Like now I've got a skiff, I'm pulling guys around and getting them into fish. It's really, it's a good time. And a lot of the time I completely shut down. Like I said to my guests, usually when we finished with the day's fishing, I said, did you guys really think about anything else but fishing? And we're talking fishing. Sometimes, like, when you're a guide, you become a psychiatrist and a friend and a teacher and all that kind of stuff. But it's awesome because all you're doing is just trying to kind of focus on the moment and just disconnecting from the news and all that stuff.
Nice. Well, and you mentioned a couple other ones here, and it looks like I've probably got two, Alaska and Canada. Maybe they're the only two spots that I've got you covered on. That you haven't quite been to. What are you thinking about that? For Alaska, when you think of Alaska, have you even thought about that much? Like, what you want to do?
Well, I've also heard that it's phenomenal trout fishing, and then I would love to try and see if I can catch some of those different salmon species there. Definitely a Chinook, I believe. That's the one that gets the biggest, right? That's the sort of the king. The king, yeah. But again, for those species, I don't care really what size they are. I just like to catch the different kind of the silvers and all those, which would be great. But also, like I said, I've heard that the trout fishing is phenomenal. And Canada, I would really, really like to catch a steelhead. I know you can get them in other places too, but I know I'm going to have to put my time in, because I know steelhead's not an easy fish to catch, but that's definitely one that I would love to accomplish one day.
That's right. Have you got into like the spay casting in that whole game yet? Done that anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I love it when I can spay cast. I'm very happy. We did the majority of that in Norway. That's kind of where I learned the spay casting thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I haven't been able to do it at many other places. Again, sort of swinging flies in that way. I did a little bit in Portland, where we got to fish a day, which was fantastic. And but I really enjoy that. The casting to me is as much fun as really getting the fish and being out there. Just trying to get the timing right and putting out a good cast is great.
That's it. If somebody comes to you and they ask you, they run into you at a show and they're like, man, I want to go do some cool trip this year. Where should I go? Where would you recommend? If maybe we focus on, I guess you could think anywhere in the world, but what do you tell people? Do you ever get that question where people are like, well, where should we go? What's that next place?
The thing is that, I mean, it comes up a lot, and usually it's very hard for me to not, say to somebody whether or not it's maybe something you can afford now, but at some point, if you can save up to do the Seychelles, it's so incredible. And I only realized it now. I guided there for 13 years, and now I realized how crazy good it is when you start comparing it to other places, which I don't really think you should ever do, but I just realized how phenomenal the fishery really is. But when it comes to closer stuff, and that's what I spoke to Jim a lot about, is just people sometimes forget their stuff that's the closest, that's very close to them, because you just kind of overlook them for these very exotic locations.
Right.
I'm just as excited about doing any trip to Mexico as I am going to Australia or anything like that. So you definitely sort of, I would always, if I was planning on booking a trip and all that stuff, firstly, obviously you have to kind of look at your budget, what you can afford, and then your target species, and then see what you can do the closest, like look at the different, you can do, for permit or something like that, you can use, there's Belize. There's obviously places you can do it in the US too, but Mexico, and you can do a lot of affordable trips there. But then you can go and try and get an exotic permit. And you can go to Australia or the Seychelles, or you can even go to Oman and catch those species permits. So, it definitely boils down to sort of budget and what people want to target species wise.
Yeah, and budget's good. And think about Mexico. Is there what spot? I know there's different places you could go. What would you recommend would be a good spot? Say you got the middle of the range budget. You're not going super high or super low.
Yeah, all those places in Ascension Bay, like Punta Allen, where you can do the Grand Slam Lodge or the Palometa Club or any of those. There's actually a couple to choose from that all really, really well priced. And a lot of the times the accommodation, the food is so fantastic, you can almost not even imagine you get some of those trips at that price. This Xcalak trip I'm doing now, like I said to the guys, it's so nice, refreshing doing a trip like that where I can tell somebody the price of a trip and not kind of feel like, oof, maybe I'm going to put them off just purely because of how expensive it is. But it's really nice to sell trips that's not kind of out of the reach of a lot of people. But the funny thing is that we're starting to see, even on the very exotic trips now, and I don't know if it's like just a newer generation of people, but even the Seychelles and some of the more exotic locations that are a little bit spendy, starting to see younger people getting into it. Young for me in general would be anything from late 30s to early 50s. maybe even like in the 60s, because usually the majority of our clients were a little bit older than that. But
right. Oh, really? Yeah.
There's definitely a generation of younger guys that are starting to do these trips now. And it's great because, a lot of these trips are also a lot better if you a little bit, and you can be fit even if you're 80 years old. But that's one thing I always preach to anybody when they go on a trip, is to just kind of see if they can practice a little bit of casting and be physically fit, because it'll add 100% to your trip.
Yeah, this is good. All right, that's a good tip for sure. All right, Jako. Well, again, there's a lot we could dig into, and maybe we'll leave that for the next one. Give us a heads up next year. What do you have coming? Anything you want to give a shout out, trips or anything coming up for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got the Seychelles coming up, and then I've got a trip to Mexico in April next year. I've got a trip to Bolivia. One little exploratory trip I'm doing is with a friend of mine in Oman, where we're going to try and get that 4th species of permit. And then I've got one back for those at Xingu for the Payara and all those other species. So yeah, it's going to be good. And otherwise, I'll be either at those places or just on the Texas coast guiding.
There you go. And we can keep up with you. Is Instagram a good place to follow all the videos and everything you have going?
Yeah, Instagram's perfect. I try and kind of keep it up to date as much as possible. And it's just Capt Jack Productions. And that's kind of where you can find it. I think even if you type in Jako Lucas, then you'll probably find that come up. And that's kind of where I keep it up to date. But if you shoot me a message there, I'll try and get to it at some point. If I'm traveling, I'll probably take me a little bit of time. Email, if I'm always open. Anybody wants to ask me any questions, can email me at any time at Jako@CaptJackProductions.com. And so always happy to help in any way I can.
There you go. Well, this has been great. I think we've got a number of spots, and maybe we'll add to Jim's episode, and I'll link out to that as well. But I'll tally these up, but I'm sure we're out at 20 on this one. So this is good. It gives people a good perspective on where we could be heading, where you've headed. So if they have questions, I guess that's the cool thing, right? If somebody wants to dig in, they can just check in with you, and maybe they could hook up with a hosted trip or just pick your brain on the trip, right?
For sure. I'll be happy to help, whether it's a trip with me or somebody else. That's what we're here for. And hopefully we can make some dreams come true.
Here's one quick random one before we get out of here. So what else? So you have this, you're obviously an expert in what you do here, the traveling and all the fish species. What else are you a expert in, or other than this, that's like random or anything else? What would you say if I asked you that?
That's a really good question, because I feel like, That's actually
you're so specific that you are just you've narrowed it down to that you do one thing really well, and that's it.
I'm stumped. I'm sure that there's I've absolutely dedicated so much of my life to that stuff. I would have to say, the only other stuff that I spend a lot of time with is either with my wife or the dogs at home, and otherwise kind of get out and try and do a few things around town and try and do some different stuff. That's the one thing that I also try and just because I realized very quickly, like, life is short, so just try and do different stuff. But definitely have to try and see maybe if I can get better at other stuff. I used to play a lot of sports at school, rugby and cricket and all that stuff, and even tennis. I played for quite a long time. And
well, here's one for you, Jako. If you were going to go pro in a sport, like say you could just be whatever sport, what sport would that be, or would that have been?
It would have probably been actually cricket, because I was pretty good at that, and I played at a pretty decent level. And just because the format of the game is so long, like baseball, it took up so much time with the practice and actually doing the activity itself. When you play a game or something like that, it just took days and hours of time. And when I fell in love with fishing so much, it kind of just immediately went on the back burner. But I would definitely say cricket would have been the one that I would have tried to excel in
cricket. And I'll put a video in for those people that don't know, because cricket's kind of has it's got the bat, right? The wide bat, or it's kind of like a bat.
That's it. Yeah. And I know for a lot of people that follow the US, I've been actually trying to get into American football a little bit now, and I watch a couple of games and actually starting to understand it a bit better, and I really enjoy it. But I know a lot of people, when they watch cricket for the first time, like, man, I don't understand what the heck is going on here, so I'm going to stop watching. And I mean, I can understand that, because some of the games are either a whole day, or we have even a format where you play 5 days of cricket and then it can still be a draw. So I think people think that's dumb, but it's fun when you play it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Awesome. All right, Jako. Well, thanks again for taking the time today. This has been a lot of fun, and I will definitely send everybody your way. Any trips. I always feel like, when people have questions, the remote stuff, you're the first name that comes to my mind. So hopefully we'll direct some people your way and catch up with you soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dave.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all links to everything else we covered today, head over to wetflyswing.com/281. 281 will get you there. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/flyshop if you want to connect with one of our local fly shop sponsors today. Support our local shops, and you support this podcast. I'm out of here for the day. I appreciate you for listening and support all along the way. And if you get a chance, please leave a quick review if you've been enjoying the show, if you haven't done so already. This helps us share the podcast and help people understand some of the value here. So appreciate that in advance if you've done that, or if you get a chance today. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/love. Love will get you there. That is always the answer. Thanks again for hanging out with us today. I really appreciate you and your support, and hope to maybe see you online or maybe on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.